Some of the time, it is hard to know what games to spend your precious time and money on. Well, there is one book that can probably help. One of the entries in the 1001 Before You Die series. The book series has covered films, books, music albums, and even places in the world. It also covered games in 1001 Video Games You Must Play Before You Die. This book has only been published and updated twice in 2010 and 2013. Back then, and even now, is it an interesting read? Does it provide good games for the novices and veterans? Let's answer those questions by poring over the near 1,000 pages of this thick, heavy book. As with just about any 1001 book, the structure consists of a preface and/or introduction followed by all the entries ordered chronologically with at least one or two indexes to track them. Each page features one or two entries which either feature small or medium-sized pictures, with big pictures taking up roughly one whole page. It goes without saying that all the pictures look very lovely, and it is a shame not every game description is accompanied by even the smallest picture, almost regardless of copyright. The games are divided by decade, from the 1970s beginning with the Oregon Trail up to the 2010s, with the last entry being 2013's BioShock Infinite. Whether starting from the first page, skimming quickly through the book, or even checking out the indexes, it almost feels like going on a nostalgia trip and wandering through a museum of video game history, with every use of technology and game design getting more advanced and complex. You could just find the title of a game that's your favourite, or a game that you've never played before or heard of, and read about it. It would have been nice to have another index for the different consoles or systems etc, as well as genres like adventure or fighting etc, but sorting by decade, game title and developer, such as Nintendo, works out fine. The writing in this book, as compiled by many contributing critics and game journalists from around the world, is generally good. Any one writer has worked from anything ranging from the official PlayStation to official Xbox magazines, for a lot of them have worked or are working with Edge magazine, which includes the general editor, so that makes sense. Any one essay consists of an average of 4 paragraphs that usually give a synopsis and an explanation for how the game works and why it is worth playing. Sometimes there are very humorous and elegant words or wordplay. Why can I not write that well sometimes? However, some of the writing is a little bland, poorly constructed, and doesn't exactly explain the superlatives of a game. A game that is on the list because it is meant to be worth playing. A recurring writing problem with the 1001 series. There are a number of glaring grammar, punctuation and spelling errors, or there is incorrect information. It's not terminus in Majora's Mask, it's termina. And I don't think 2009's Shatter is any more of a sports game than Arkanoid is. Still, those errors are mostly nitpicks, but the aforementioned relative lack of superlatives, not to mention some poor comparisons to prequels or sequels or other games of the same genre, do make for some confusing insight or discussion. For example, sequels that improved on their predecessors are analysed in a way that makes their preceding games inferior and not worth playing. Yet that predecessor is also included, so why have them both? And again, if a critic seemingly spends more time talking about the negative aspects of a game, why is it on a worth playing list? One example is Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. What is that game doing there? To be fair, Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie are two of my favourite games of all time, and I've not played Nuts and Bolts. The vehicle construction stuff does admittedly sound kinda cool, but why is it there? Even the critic says it could have been better. Speaking of the inclusion of that game, there is, of course, the most subjective analysis of this book. The actual games that are included, or are not included. Overall, the list is solid, featuring many of my personal favourites from over the years, and there are surely many other people's favourite games here too. But there are some weird or even surprising inclusions, sometimes at the expense of other games. Again, the comparison of games in a whole series or franchise applies to, for example, Donkey Kong Country 3, which is included instead of the first 2 games. Don't get me wrong, Donkey Kong Country 3 is a good game that I haven't completed as of this recording, and the explanation behind why it is good, considering that it came out after the launch of the Nintendo 64. But where are the previous 2 games? And where are the first and especially second generations of Pokemon? Again, it is all subjective. Is a game included because it was revolutionary or important or introduced something that became a staple of games, such as the internal battery for saving data in The Legend of Zelda, a fact that is not even mentioned in that game's entry? the editor, and even games developer Peter Molyneux, best known for making the Black and White and Fable games, acknowledged that much of the really old games included have not aged well. And speaking of old games, well, a number of games in this list are probably too obscure or too hard to find, even in specific countries, despite the writer's best intentions to say how and where to play it. Mother 3 has still not been released outside of Japan, and can mostly only be played on an emulator. Much of the games come with recommendations to play it on a specific system, including the arcades. Another glaring fault is the repetition. To be fair, franchises like Mario are notable and feature many exceptional titles, but there are too many Legend of Zelda games, too many Resident Evil games, too many Final Fantasy games, too many Grand Theft Auto games. There are even 2 or 3 pages in a row of Grand Theft Auto, as well as Metroid or even Ratchet & Clank. Some of the weirder inclusions also include phone or internet games. There are way too many games from the 2000s onwards, with only a little over 20 pages for the 2010s, just because of the time of publication. Of course, there are some outstanding games from the 2000s included, and there are some indies included, such as Machinarium or Limbo, but other decades could have been analysed some more. It almost felt like there were a little too many shoot-'em-ups, puzzle games, and racing games, especially for more realistic-looking ones. So, should one look at 1001 video games you must play before you die? Well, it is hard to say if you should, considering that this list has not been updated since 2013, possibly because films and other categories in the 1001 series got more popularity and recognition. Certainly an update would have been nice, featuring a few contemporary games or even omitting certain titles like the updated edition did, with getting rid of the first edition's inclusion of Army of Two the 40th Day. It is probably better to find a list of all the game titles at least, and just look at the names and decide for yourself what games should or should not have been included. But if you can find a way online to get a copy, you should be able to get it for a reasonable price. Much of the writing is entertaining and informative. It is fun just to quickly flip through the pages to see some title you've never played before, or find your favourite game in the index and see if the writer analysed that game properly, even for nostalgia's sake. The writing especially makes it fun to read about a game you haven't played before, where a picture can be formed in one's mind about what the game is like to play, even without pictures being included at times. When putting every single word and sentence in this book together, it shows the general idea that games have evolved in many ways, for better and for worse. And no matter who you are, there is something for everyone. From the artistic triumphs and casual, relaxing titles to the challenging all-nighters or even multiplayer games that are probably too addictive. Overall, while probably more of a novelty or even mild curiosity, it is an interesting read, with some words that I wish I could use in my reviewing of games. And how many games in this list have I sunk a good number of hours into? Approximately 182 it seems, a number of which I haven't even completed, outside of the essentially never-ending ones like Animal Crossing, and there are so many other games besides those in this book that are waiting for me to play them. There we go. I hope you enjoyed my first book review. Well, a review about a book about games. There are other books about games, whether I have them on my shelf or not. Let me know if you want me to do this kind of review again. And of course, let me know what you think of 1001 video games you must play before you die. Have you played much of the games featured? Do you think it is a good list or good read? Talk about it in the comments. And I'll be back in a little while because Merry Christmas! Or whatever it is you celebrate. I might try and upload a review or two in between Christmas and New Year's Eve, but nevertheless, hope you have a good rest of December 2020 and have a good day or night or whatever it is. See you next time.